Hello, welcome. My name is Alex Voorhoeve. I'm the head of department for philosophy, logic, and scientific method. And I'd really like to welcome you to our degrees at the LSE. Let me tell you just a little bit about myself. You can see my email there, and I'm always open to receiving questions. I studied economics and then philosophy, first in Rotterdam, the Netherlands, where I'm from. Then I briefly worked in the civil service, but the pull of philosophy was too strong, and finally I returned to the dark side of the force, where I've stayed ever since, and I've taught at LSE now for 17 years. I write and I teach principally on topics in egalitarianism, especially fair distribution in healthcare, but also on decision theory, and recently I've developed an interest in the thought of Epicurus. In my spare time, I used to be a rock and roll star. You can see me there performing with our departmental band, The Critique of Pure Rhythm. But unfortunately, I didn't follow Epicurus's advice and I had kids. And now I'm just a dad in my spare time. And instead of singing a whole lot of shaking going on, I sing I'm a Little Teapot and other nursery songs, and I'm asleep by 9 p.m. Epicurus was right. But let me tell you about us as a department. What's the department that you've just joined? Well, we have a very distinctive style, and there are three elements to it. First, we do analytic philosophy. And what this means is that we focus a lot on clarity of expression and on developing precise and powerful arguments. So logic is part of our training here, especially for undergraduates, but we see it as woven into every course, that we drill you on developing good, clear, valid, powerful arguments. The second distinctive element to our department is that we do philosophy in a way that is continuous with the social and natural sciences. We study philosophical questions in an interdisciplinary way. To give you an example from my own research, I use ideas from health economics to discuss the fair allocation of health resources. Other colleagues, for example, philosophers of science, make use of ideas about modeling in climate science to discuss how we ought to make decisions under severe uncertainty. So what we do isn't philosophy separate from the empirical sciences, but rather philosophy that's continuous with it. Third, we strive to do philosophy that's socially relevant. Each of us in the department does policy relevant research, and if you look at our recent publications and talks, and also if you attend our lectures, you'll see that we work on a diverse set of hot topics: climate change, war, distributive justice, pensions, animal rights, the ethics of AI, and so on. And a lot of the topics that grab our attention and inspire us come from you. So we will be advising your dissertations, for example. We'll also be giving you feedback on essays. And a lot of the ideas that have come to motivate me, for example, my interest in Epicurus, but also in recent years in consent and big data, have come originally from students bringing fascinating new ideas to me. And the same is true of my other colleagues. So you can play a big role in making and keeping our philosophy socially relevant. So this tradition of ours, in which we do philosophy analytically in an interdisciplinary and socially engaged way, is a long one. It stretches back all the way to the beginning of the LSE. So one of its founders was Beatrice Webb. She was what we might now call a political theorist. She thought a lot about both distributive justice and inequality and its impact on democracy. She was greatly exercised by the fate of the working classes in the UK. But she was not just a political philosopher or political theorist, she was also a sociologist and more broadly, a social scientist across various disciplines. Bertrand Russell, the famous philosopher, taught at LSE shortly after its inception. He taught, interestingly, on German social democracy, again showing the kind of interest in ideas and social ideas which motivated the philosophers and social thinkers at the founding of LSE. Lionel Robbins is a famous economist and also director of the LSE. The library that you'll be studying in is named after him. He was also a philosopher. He wrote a famous book on economic method, which those of you who will study philosophy of economics or philosophy of the social sciences will no doubt read. Another fascinating thinker from LSE's history is B.R. Ambedkar. Those of you who know India and its constitution will know him as the father of the Indian constitution. He was born into a Dalit or untouchable family and nonetheless managed to get an excellent education, including doing a PhD at LSE. And he became an all-round interdisciplinary thinker and an extremely powerful voice, both for the independence of India and for the liberation of the Dalits or oppressed castes in India. Karl Popper was the founder of our department of philosophy at LSE. Had gone on long before that, but Karl Popper, who came right after the war, 1946, who was famous for two sets of works, one on the philosophy of science, the logic of scientific discovery, and the other, his work in social and political philosophy, his war effort, as he put it, the philosopher's contribution to how to address the problems of the Second World War and the social problems related to it, the open society and its enemies. Both of those books were core to the development of philosophy at LSE, philosophy of science and moral and political philosophy. Imre Lakatos was another famous philosopher of science who both built on and mercilessly criticized Popper's ideas. The department's building is named after him. That's why we will see you in the Lakatos building. Many of you will have heard of the Nobel Prize-winning economist, social theorist, and philosopher Friedrich von Hayek. He was responsible for there being a philosophy department at LSE because he brought Karl Popper to the LSE. And his philosophy was interestingly different from the roughly social democratic ethos which the founding fathers of LSE promoted. And I think it shows the great strength of philosophy at LSE, but also the school as a whole, that it housed thinkers in so many different traditions. Hayek is in a more libertarian tradition, who really made the best arguments they could for their particular views. And we invite you to do the same. We definitely don't want one point of view only put forward in our seminars. Amartya Sen is another famous philosopher and economist, another Nobel Prize winner, who taught for many years at LSE. And finally, Nancy Cartwright, who until recently was a professor in the department, is a famous philosopher of science and philosopher of social science in particular, whose work you will encounter, especially when she talks about the ways in which evidence can inform policy. So today's department is in this tradition, and like our forebears, we're extremely diverse, and like LSE in general. So one of the things that characterizes LSE is that by some measures, we are the most diverse university on the planet. Staff, students come from all over the world. We even have a few Brits just for the sake of maintaining our roots in the UK. Some of us have become British, like myself. But also the diversity comes in terms of thought, background, experience. So One of the things that sets our department apart from other philosophy departments is how interdisciplinary we are and the backgrounds of our staff, and also many of our students, especially postgraduate students, but also many undergrads, study different fields. So our backgrounds are in economics, mathematics, cognitive science, biology, physics, political science, law, and many other disciplines. Our special strengths remain, as in our tradition, in the philosophy of science, in decision and game theory, and in moral and political philosophy. Let me tell you about a few characteristics, a few things that we will encourage you to adopt, let's say philosophical attitudes, in your work with us in the department. The first thing is, of course, that we value clarity. And here's what Amartya Sen says about it. He says, the Sanskrit word for philosophy, darsana, means seeing clearly. Philosophy does have much to do with clarifying matters. Lucidity does not help the survival of baseless beliefs, silly deductions, groundless prejudice, or the justification of needless misery. Well, that is something for clear reasoning. So clarity of thought should always be number one. Now, of course, clarity exposes you because it means that other people can easily criticize your work. And that is good. You should expect criticism. Karl Popper's philosophy of science, and indeed also his moral and political philosophy, in which he celebrated what he called the open society, celebrated openness to criticism. Indeed, according to him, it was the hallmark of a rational approach both to the development of knowledge and to the development of society. And here's what Popper says about criticism. He says, whenever we propose a solution to a problem, or you might say an argument in an essay, we ought to try as hard as we can to overthrow our solution, to falsify it in his terms, rather than defend it. But he knows this is not the ordinary human approach. Instead, we like to defend our views rather than attempt to overthrow our own views. And so he says, few of us, unfortunately, practice this, but other people, fortunately, will supply the criticism for us. Now, these other people include me and many of your other teachers, but they should also include your colleagues, your fellow students. You should seek out their constructive criticism of your work in order to improve it. Now, in the face of such criticism from us, but also from others in seminar, be resilient. That is my next suggestion to you. This is what the famous Oxford philosopher Philippa Foot says about her time as a student and then a junior lecturer in philosophy. She would attend the seminars of Elizabeth Anscombe, who was a famously fierce debater and brilliant intellect. And she said, every day we would talk philosophy. I opposed nearly everything she said. Naturally, I was regularly defeated, but I would be there objecting away the next time. It was like in those children's comics where a steamroller runs over a character who becomes flattened, but the character is there in the next episode unscathed. That attitude should inform you in seminars. If you put forward ideas which are then criticized by others, by fellow students or by teachers, remember Philippa Foot and remember that you are just like a character in a children's comic. You may be flattened one day, but you'll be back the next time for another episode. And indeed, if you change your mind because your arguments have shown to be problematic, you are the person who's gained most from the seminar. And that is a wonderful insight from Epicurus. He says, he who loses an argument gains most. That's one of my favorite sayings in philosophy. I remember a seminar on decision theory where I was meant to defend one view, and Richard Bradley and Johanna Thoma, two colleagues, did a much better job of defending the opposing view. And in the end, I consoled myself with the thought that I had to change my mind, and in fact, that I had gained more from the seminar than they had. Now, with this in mind, I really want to invite you to see your time here as a social activity. I know, especially in this COVID period, it's not easy to see it such, but do your best to do philosophy together with others. What does this mean? Well, our lectures, at least in the first term and perhaps throughout the year, will be predominantly online. Many of them will be live, not all of them, but many of them will be live. And it's good to attend them live on Zoom. You'll be able to ask questions. Teachers might set tasks to you and put you in breakout rooms, etc. That's a way of connecting with other people on your course and engaging with the material. The aim is, and that's also the plan, to have all classes and seminars be in person and attend them. Don't miss out, because you never know which of these seminars is the one in which you make the good connection to another student or get that insight which will stick with you for years. Outside of seminars and classes, study together. We have a wonderful common room at LSE, and there are also lots of study spaces in, the common room in the philosophy department at LSE, but there are also lots of study spaces in the school as a whole, in some wonderful new buildings like the center buildings and in the library. And you can also book smaller study rooms via an LSE system. Seek out your academic mentor. Each one of you will, in the first week, be assigned an academic mentor. Make sure that you see them early on, build a connection, and use them as a sounding board or simply as someone to have a chat with about your studies, and especially someone whom you should seek out if you're experiencing any difficulties. Finally, I invite you to support each other. I hope that this will be a time in which you can build friendships, and remember, you're never in competition with each other. Somebody else's excellent argument or high grade or an essay doesn't in any way detract from your own, and in fact, the best work happens when we help each other in the ways that I've outlined before. But not just in philosophy, but also more broadly when we find pleasure and support with our fellow students and with your academic mentors. And as part of the support for each other, I just want to emphasize something which you will hear many times. Please do follow LSE's COVID norms. Now, what are these norms? Well, the broadest norm is keep calm and help each other, but more specifically, wear a mask in buildings and in the classroom, wash and sanitize your hands regularly, do regular testing. So LSE urges you to do so every 4 days and to be able to show that you've done your test when you come to campus, cover any coughs and sneezes, get vaccinated. There is an LSE medical center which will offer you approved vaccines if you have not had them already, and let the LSE know if you're unwell. Above all, stay home if you have COVID symptoms, get a test and don't go out. And if you test positive, you must self-isolate. Now, we're well aware after the difficult period behind us how important it is, nonetheless, with these precautions in place, to see each other, to do things together, to learn together, and simply to have fun together. So with this in mind, we will really aim to have as many social activities as possible, sometimes scaled down a bit or with some restrictions, but nonetheless with the aim of us to do things together, to get to know each other, to build friendships, and do philosophy together. So for the undergraduate students, we will be aiming to run Cumberland Lodge November 5 to 7. That's a beautiful hunting lodge that you see there in a picture, where we have spaces for students to stay overnight and enjoy a program of walks in the countryside and philosophy and debates. We will also be organizing 2 MSc away days, 1 in each term, with lots of outdoor activities, walks, etc., because those are COVID safe, but also some intellectual activities, lectures, etc., in some lovely locations around London. This week, there will be the philosophy soiree with a jazz band on Friday, the 24th of September from 5:30 to 7:30 on the top floor of the new academic building. It's a beautiful space where hopefully we'll be able to open the doors and make use of the terrace. The weather is, well, unpredictable in London, so let's try to dress warmly and bring an umbrella just in case, so that we can all get to know each other, have a drink, and a chat and enjoy some jazz. So I look forward to seeing you there, and especially to seeing you in the classroom. Welcome to the LSE and welcome to the department.